Today, I'll show you how to use a great public resource to figure out where you can go after a big earthquake hits and how you can access that information even when there's no internet or power. Hang in there while I talk about a tool for Snohomish County first, and then I'll show you how you can get the same information for other counties as well. The Snohomish County Department of Emergency Management worked with FEMA on a grant to analyze the impact of a Cascadian subduction zone earthquake of 9.0 in magnitude. They predicted the damage to Snohomish County and came up with a term they call population islands. These islands are areas within which you'd be confined, and the boundaries that confine you would be caused by things like collapsed bridges and overpasses or roads that turn like quicksand due to liquefaction. They created an online interactive map. I'll bring that up now and leave a link to the map in the video description. These white lines are the boundaries of the population islands I mentioned. You can enter an address in this box up here. I'll put in Maltby, Washington. It will zoom in to the address that you entered onto the map. You can see that this population island goes all the way from Mill Creek down to Sammamish toward Issaquah. These boundaries are long-term obstacles, and there could be other temporary obstacles blocking roads, such as downed trees, utility poles, or car accidents. You can see here that we wouldn't be able to get to Linwood. The boundary between this island and Linwood is where I-5 runs. There's two population islands between this one and Monroe, and that's because they're expecting a large portion of Highway 522 to either sink from liquefaction or to collapse. Monroe itself is split into more than one population island. Remember that the Cascadian subduction zone quake could have a huge impact over a large area from California all the way to Vancouver, BC. Make sure to be prepared with all the supplies you need for a few weeks. The other really cool thing about this map is that they've also included potential community points of distribution, or CPODS for short. I'm going to zoom in to show you that. These are the spots where they help to distribute food and supplies to people after the earthquake. Once I zoomed in, these green flags popped up, and if you click on one of them, it will show you the name of the site, address, and its type. There are 3 types of distribution sites, and the main difference is the number of people they're able to serve each day. Type 1 can serve up to 20,000 per day, 2 up to 10,000 people per day, and 3 up to 5,000 people per day. This one is Hidden River Middle School, a type 3, and this one is Valley View Middle School, also a type 3. So you want to drive to the Valley View Middle School distribution site. I've zoomed in on the map to show the roads better. Perhaps the usual way you would go would be to take Welch Road to Elliott Road. But look, Elliott Road is in a different population island, so you can't go that way. That's because they're expecting this 522 overpass to collapse, and because many parts of Elliott Road have a high liquefaction risk. You can use this map to plan a different route to get there, or you may decide that the Hidden River Middle School site is closer and go to that one instead. Keep in mind that these are potential distribution sites. It's possible a site will be damaged in the quake, or that they won't be able to get enough people to staff the site. Be sure to note down all the potential distribution sites in your frequently used population islands, just in case. I've mentioned liquefaction a few times now, and I want to show you a video about that so you understand what it is. And I'll put a link to the video in this video's description.
Did you know whole buildings can sink into the ground in a matter of just a few seconds? It's called liquefaction, and it's when solid ground begins to act like a liquid. Have you ever stood on the edge of the beach and wiggled your toes in the sand while the waves crashed over your feet? You've experienced this phenomenon. 1 second you're standing on what seems like solid ground, and the next your feet are sinking in. For liquefaction to occur, the solid particle of the ground becomes suspended in water, and when an outside force is applied, like your toes wiggling in the sand, the ground will act like a liquid. Solid ground is solid because the particles of the ground are in contact with each other and stay in place due to friction. So a building could be standing for years, but if there's enough rain, the ground will become saturated, reducing the friction between solid particles. If the soil has enough water soak in it, then any vibration will make the earth act like a liquid. In conditions like these, even a minor rainstorm and an earthquake can sink a whole building into the ground. Once the earthquake stops or the ground loses moisture, the entire building will be stuck, buried in solid ground.
Now that you know what liquefaction is, I'm excited to share this map that I found while I was recording this video. When it comes up, it has this message telling you that this site is meant for emergency planners, and any distribution sites mentioned might not actually become distribution sites. So I'm going to click OK on that. And you can see that it has a much bigger area. This map actually covers everywhere from Skagit County through Thurston County. I'm going to put in an address of Maltby, Washington, and that brings us down into this area. This line here across the map, that's the border between Snohomish County and King County. And then all of these dots are distribution sites. One thing I notice is that it's not showing me street names. As I'm going to go over to the right here, you see this icon that looks like 3 books stacked up. On that, there's many layers in this map that aren't important to us. I'm gonna get rid of those so that we can see the street names. And I'm only going to keep the CPOD sites and the population islands. Now you see that the street names are popping in. I'm gonna click on this liquefaction layer, and when I turn that on, you can see the orange coming up. That shows high-risk liquefaction areas. And you can see how many of the barriers are formed because of those liquefaction areas. The other thing I want to point out is that the distribution sites are in different colors. Some are white, some are light green, some are dark green. So I'm going to go over here to the right to this icon with 3 lines. It's a legend, and that's explaining the difference between the colors in the sites. From what I can gather, emergency planners evaluated many locations as possible distribution site, and they used some criteria to rank them. The white ones did poorly in the ranking and probably won't become distribution sites, and the darkest color ones scored high in the rankings and are probably the most likely sites to be used if they're viable after the earthquake happens. For liquefaction, this orange color is moderate to high and the orange reddish color is high. So I'm going to close that. I'm going to show you one of the white ones. You see this one says it's a King County Parks Department, but under CPOD type, it says not enough usable space. So I think that's why it's white. So just focus in more on the darker colored sites of distribution here. Another really cool thing in this map, you can right click on the map and you can print. Know that it only prints what you see on the screen. So if you want to print this whole map, you would need to print and then scroll down and then print, and then later you'd have to piece together the map. One of the ways that I'm personally using this map is I'm using it to change some of my habits now. For example, I was shopping at a grocery store that's not in the population island that I live in, and now I've changed to shopping at the location of that grocery store chain that is in my population island. I have a much greater chance of being in the population that I live in when the earthquake happens. For things that aren't required, like the gym you go to, the places you shop or run other errands, if you can switch those into the population island that you live in, you'll be more likely to be able to get home after the earthquake hits. If you're not in Washington, you can search your state for a liquefaction map, and you should also search for a map of bridges and overpasses. If you look at those 2 maps, you'll be able to come up with your own population island guess, and it'll be pretty accurate. For distribution sites, remember that the sites in Washington state are mostly on public land, schools, parks, fairgrounds. Look for that where you live, and you can take a pretty good guess as to where some distribution sites might be near you. I'd love it if you would comment below with any other ideas of how you might use this map. I'm in the process now of making a video series to show you how to get prepared and not be scared. Subscribe to get notified.